Good afternoon, everyone. It's another Conversations with Compassion, and bit of a different time today because of time zones. But in case you haven't met me before, I'm Helen Ferguson, and I'm a psychotherapist, and I specialise in trauma for women and children. So I support and guide women to heal and recover from childhood trauma and complex trauma and sexual abuse, and so that they can create a safer future. And I set up Conversations with Compassion last year, so we're in season 2 this year, because there were quite a lot of women coming to me kind of saying self-compassion is lazy, self-compassion's self-indulgent, they don't have time for it, they don't have space for it, and there was a whole lists and lists of it. So in conversation with women one-to-one in therapy with me, that was great. I was able to support them with that. But actually what I wanted to do was bring the conversation out into the open and invite women and men and anybody that wants to have this conversation to share what self-compassion means for them and to share the inspiration. So I am really, really excited to welcome Carolyn, our guest today. I was on Carolyn's the Search for Serotonin podcast a few weeks back, I think, Carolyn, I think it was.
Yeah.
And she kindly agreed to come and join me on Conversations with Compassion. And she's joining us live from Pittsburgh. Hence the time change for today. It's usually in the morning UK time, but we couldn't do that to you, Carolyn. That's early hours of the morning for you. But please spend a couple of minutes introducing yourself and what you do and what you're doing in your podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for accommodating the time difference. But like Helen said, my name is Carolyn Ferrick, and I do live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in the US. I have been diagnosed with high-functioning anxiety. The first memory I have of high-functioning anxiety was when I was 5 years old. I went to Catholic school and I learned about heaven and hell, and I had a panic attack regarding death. So that was my earliest memory with mental health struggles. And that was, a big part of my childhood. And then it wasn't until I was 14 that I started experiencing some clinical depression. Throughout high school and college, I suffered severely with my mental health. I denied it. I didn't think I qualified to have mental health issues. I thought, I have 2 parents, I have a home, I have food on the table, I can't qualify to have these issues, or I don't think I should feel depressed because, I have all of this good in my life. So it was a really big internal struggle for me for a long, long time. And I just fought back and forth, hit a lot of stuff, which led to a lot of really dark places in my life. And it wasn't actually until 2020, so post college, that I actually started taking my mental health seriously. And I started seeing, a regular therapist. I got in with a psychiatrist. I started taking medication. And when I first started seeing my psychiatrist, he actually mentioned, "Hey, have you ever heard of OCPD? This might be something that you struggle with." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And it wasn't until 2021 that I actually had a neurological evaluation done, and they formally diagnosed me with OCPD. So ever since then, I've kind of been diving in more to the OCPD space. In November of 2021, I said, "Hey, let's start sharing this with the world. Let me share my story, share my experiences, maybe share some information about OCPD," because I had never heard of it prior to getting diagnosed. And actually, the more research I do, the more it makes sense. A lot of the things in my life that I've been struggling with, like the anxiety, the depression, those are all side effects of OCPD. So yeah, I started the search for serotonin, like I said, November of 2021. I just wanted to start, using my voice, sharing my story, owning my mental illnesses. I've had suicide attempts in the past. I've struggled with, alcohol abuse and, substance abuse and things like that, because hiding my mental health and not talking about it. And I wanted to give off this image of everything's fine, she's a happy girl. So I wanted to use my podcast to share my voice, take back power of my mental illness, but also, pull back the curtain and get very real, get very vulnerable, and just tell people, hey, if you knew me in college, you didn't really know me, and here's what's actually going on. So I think just sharing my own story has really resonated with a lot of people, and it kind of took some people in my own life's perception of me and made me almost more human to them, because a lot of people reached out and said, I would have never known that you were dealing with this stuff. You made it look so, fun and easy, and like you weren't struggling. And so just sharing that and being open, it has really helped me on my journey.
And it's amazing what you're doing with your podcast. I mean, obviously, having been on it, but also spending time before I went on it listening to kind of your back catalogue, as it were, and the inspiration and like you say, the kind of sharing of the vulnerability, and but also what it does is it helps to break the stigma around mental health and mental illness, and and that is in an essence kind of what I'm trying to do with this live show too, is but more specifically, I suppose, for me, around trauma, which and what women and men and children experience of that. So with that in mind, I kind of want to explore with you what you kind of think, what self-compassion means for you. What, is a lot of people, it's different. I think everybody has described it differently for them. I don't think there's been any two descriptions that have been the same. So don't worry about repetition or anything like that. So, what does it mean for you? What does self-compassion mean for you?
Yeah, of course. So we actually touched on this when we talked on my podcast about, with OCPD, one of the biggest things is it's a perfectionism personality disorder. So people get very rigid in perfectionism and thinking their way is the best way. And you have to live up to these high standards, and you kind of throw yourself into work. And so for me, I never felt that I could give myself self-compassion, because I was so focused on, being perfect in everyone else's eyes and putting on this front and this facade. And so, I give out self-compassion. Or not self-compassion, I give out compassion to other people so easily, just that patience, kindness, and respect. And it's really hard for me to turn that around and do that internally, because, like I said, I think that I have to live up to a standard and I don't have room to make mistakes. But what I've learned in my own healing journey is that, you have to just be patient with yourself. You have to, talk to yourself as if you're talking to one of your best friends. Something that's really helped me in my own journey is my boyfriend has been such a big support person for me. So whenever I'm struggling internally, or I'm getting really hard on myself, or I'm just not being super nice to myself, I stop for a moment. I say, well, what would Corbin say if he was talking to you in this situation? And using kind of like that outer perspective of someone else to then treat myself with that internal kindness, respect, patience, love, and all of that you deserve when you are dealing with self-compassion. So to me, it's just, being patient with yourself, having, grace for yourself, and just respecting that you're always growing and you're always evolving and you're always learning.
Absolutely, absolutely. Beautifully put, actually, Carolyn, beautifully put. Because it is one of it's incredible, the blocks that people have to self-compassion, that we are hardwired for it. We're, in terms of our brain, our very kind of central mammalian brain, we are hardwired for compassion, and therefore wired for self-compassion. So but what we do is we give it out, and we would never speak to our friends, our loved ones, our partners, in the way that we sometimes speak to ourselves. We wouldn't do it, because we're kind, we're warm, we're empathic, and we're respectful, and we have dignity. We have a dignity for other people. So you're absolutely right. It's how you then turn that inward, especially when you're in pain, especially when you're struggling emotionally and psychologically and physically. It's somehow harder for people to do that. There's almost, like you say, that, well, hang on, I've got to be perfect, I've got to do this, I've got to make sure, I can't look like I'm failing, I can't look like I'm going to let other people down. So it's really, really hard for people to notice that they're giving it out. But how do I give it to myself? It is one of the hardest things, and like the foundation of my therapeutic work, is self-compassion therapy and compassionate inquiry. So, but it's like the bit that people get angry with. It's almost like, Helen, why are you making me do this? I'm like, you'll see. So it is that how that turning it towards ourselves, how that happens. Do you think that there was a pivotal kind of moment? I know, obviously you've been on a long mental health journey so far, but do you think that there was a pivotal moment that you kind of went, hang on, I've got to do something differently now, because I can't, it's got to come from me, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's 3 kind of main pivotal moments in my mental health journey that really kind of woke me up and said, "Hey, you can't keep doing this. You need to start, looking out for yourself and taking care of yourself, because if you don't do it for you, no one else will." And
Mhm.
so that first moment for me was when I restarted my therapy journey, which was actually back in 2019. It was after I graduated college. I just moved to Pittsburgh, and there was one day I was working a serving job. I went in and I had a 45-minute long panic attack because at the time I didn't know it, but I was actually suffering through a PTSD attack.
Mhm.
And the year prior, I had suffered from a sexual assault. And so I suppressed that. I didn't get help. I buried it. And after all the stuff I dealt with in college, all of the loss, all of the hurt, all of the trauma, and things like that, I wasn't getting help. I wasn't talking about my mental health. I wasn't sharing that with anybody. So
Mhm.
after that, insanely long panic attack, I was like, I need to get back into therapy. I need to start doing this. I need to change something because it's not working. And I got back into therapy and I wasn't still being honest and I wasn't really diving into the process. And then, the pandemic hit. And so I was like, oh, I got medication. I don't need to stay in therapy. I'm good. And it wasn't until August of 2020 that I really found my current therapist, found my current psychiatrist. And after a couple months off of therapy, I was like, no, we need to get serious. We need to get into this. You need to prioritize your health and your wellness, and you need to mend your own relationship with yourself, because at that point in my life I couldn't even look in the mirror and say that I loved myself. So that
Yeah.
really kicked it all off for me. And so I did a lot of internal work and a lot of, just alone time and focusing on what I needed and figuring out what worked for me for my own mental health. And then in the summer of 2021, I ended up breaking my ankle. And yeah, I tore ligaments. I had, a plate and 9 screws inserted in my foot. And during that, yeah, and during that time, I couldn't walk for 4 months. I couldn't drive for 4 months, couldn't leave the house. I couldn't even shower on my own. Like everything was a struggle. And I knew that, like, once that happened, I was like, you can either sit here for the next 4 months and fall into probably the worst depression of your life, or you can, be proactive in this situation and start giving yourself what you need ahead of time so it doesn't get as bad as it's going to.
Yeah.
So in that moment I was like, well, I'm going to be sitting. What can I do to keep myself, happy and engaged and wanting to wake up every morning? And I thought back to, the last time in my life where I really felt happy and whole, which was childhood. So I'm like, okay, what did I like to do when I was a kid? Like to color, I like to read. I used to read books all the time, and I don't have time for that in my life anymore between college. I never got to read for leisure and things like that. And then, I got into cooking more and, doing those kinds of things. So just basic things that I used to enjoy as a kid, like, oh, we got paint by numbers and stuff like that too. So that's stuff that I could just like sit and do. Yeah. And I'm like, just little things that, people wouldn't even think about that are just so simple to do. Like you can go on Amazon, order a bunch of that stuff. It comes to your door. You can do it while you watch TV. Just reconnecting with my inner child at that point helped me kind of figure out what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And the more I leaned into, that inner child, the more I realized I don't like the career I'm in. I was working in higher education at the time, and like I loved higher education. I loved working with students, but I knew my passion and what I needed to do for my own internal relationship with myself was going towards the podcast and opening up about my mental health and just sharing my story, because I felt so alone for so long that, if I shared it with other people, then hopefully if I could help one other person feel less alone, then, that would help me take accountability for myself and take care of myself while also putting it out and doing some good for others, hopefully.
And you are. You are. I see what you're doing. I see all the messages that you give out, and you are doing that. And you're absolutely right. A lot of people think about, and especially kind of, in the social media world that we're in right now, that when people talk about the inner child, that it's always the wounded inner child, and it isn't. It's actually connecting with the playful, creative, curious, explorative child that's within us. So, yes, in trauma healing and the work that I do, yes, I'm working with the wounded inner child, but actually we also connect with the playful one, the one that will actually help you connect with your compassion too, because you're nurturing her, and she's still there, she's still in your heart, she's still part of you. And it is all of that nurturing aspect of that, and so I'm really, really glad. I think you're the first guest to actually have connected with it in that way, and talk about that playful, curious inner child, and what made me happy. What are the things that actually make me happy? What are the things that bring me joy? What are the things that bring me a sense of peace? And really recognizing that and noticing that. Because actually what it also does is it helps to regulate the nervous system too. You know that, but it helps to regulate the nervous system too. So, it does so many things. And that's what, self-compassion is about. Mindfulness, it is about kindness, a common humanity, and that being kind to yourself as well. But it is also, much broader as well, in terms of those experiences that we can tap into, as long as we've had them. That's, we've got to have had those experiences. So, the fact that you did have those lovely childhood memories, that you could kind of go, well, what made me happy? But that made me happy, that made me feel like this, and you connect with that, and you let that flourish, you let that bloom and flourish inside you. What do you think some of the kind of obstacles to welcoming self-compassion into your life were, do you think?
Yeah. So, like I said, with my diagnosis for OCPD, just living in that idea of being perfect was hard for me to kind of let that go. And so, working through that in therapy really helped me kind of embrace self compassion a little bit more. I think, just who I am as a person, I want to always put out the best version of myself. But the podcast has really helped me just realize that, the best version of yourself is how you show up every day.
Yeah.
And, if it's not your best day, like this morning, I was super anxious before logging on. And I'm like, but, that's me. That's part of who I am. And so I can still show up. And if it's not perfect, it's real and it's honest and it's me. So just getting past those blocks in my head and, just saying to myself that, as long as you show up, as long as you keep, working towards what you want to work towards, and as you keep advocating for yourself and just doing the best you can with what you have and just taking it one day at a time. And that has really helped me in my own journey with self-compassion, and the podcast, like I said, the search for serotonin. I want to, help other people find happiness, but I want to show that it's not all bad. Mental health is, yes, something that you have to work towards constantly, but, you can have fun doing it, and there's good ways to do it.
Yeah.
And really, like, something that I've done is like just enjoying every little moment of your day, even when you're doing stuff around the house, like doing laundry or doing dishes, just like taking the time to slow down and just realize, oh, I'm so thankful that I have the time to do this right now. Or just, changing your mindset and getting over those mindset like blocks of always looking at things negatively and reframing it in a positive way has really helped me a lot too.
And that, it is, you're right, to be able to try, and for a lot that I mean, I'm sure, in your journey, it's actually incredibly difficult sometimes to find that light, that glimmer. And I'm so pleased that you've connected with that you've been able to do that. But it is very hard for people, to kind of almost allow themselves as well to to acknowledge that there are some good things, but also kind of believe that they are deserving of them, that they deserve these good things to happen, even in healing. And one of the biggest things that a lot of my clients, probably about halfway through, that they do is kind of, oh, maybe I don't deserve to feel differently. Maybe I don't deserve to feel worthy, to feel free, to feel healed. And I always say healing is do we ever reach the pinnacle of healing? No, we don't, because I think there are always going to be things that happen for us. There's always going to be those triggers. What happens through any healing, through any therapeutic healing and recovery, is the ability to be able to manage those far better than you were at the deepest, darkest moments, when you couldn't get out of bed, and when you can't see the light, when you feel isolated, when you feel alone. And that is, those moments are the blocks for self-compassion, and being able to kind of allow yourself to feel that compassion for yourself. But certainly, like you say, it's being able to, hearing you, and I think what will be inspirational for a lot of people listening to this. I know it's a bank holiday here in the UK, so there's been less, people are outside doing stuff, but they'll watch on replay later. But what people will get from this is, yes, you can have those obstacles, but they are, I don't even know that this is a word, I'm going to use it anyway, overcomeable.
Yeah, exactly.
I just made up a word. Those obstacles are overcomeable, and it is about how you connect with her, she, him, they, but also how you allow yourself to then be in the world. And like you say, if people are striving for perfection, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen, because perfect doesn't exist.
Exactly.
You're you're trying to grasp onto a cloud. It's not going to happen. But what you're looking for is peace. And
yeah.
I, listening to you say, I was anxious about coming on here today. I get anxious about it, because I say kind of, I do a lot of those words.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to edit those out. No, this is me, and this is the way I speak, and this is the way that I am with people. And if we start to kind of try and what's the word I'm looking for, kind of sugarcoat that, then you're not yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we're telling people that you have to be perfect, and no, they don't.
Exactly. Perfect is unattainable. Like you said, if you are aiming for perfection, which is what I've done for a lot of my life, is you're just setting yourself up for failure, because you can't live up to that expectation every single time. And so for me, what I really struggle with is I just don't do things, because I know if I'm not going to do them perfectly, then why even put myself through the stress? So that's led to a lot of procrastination in my life, which is common with OCPD, because you're like, why even do it at all if it's not going to be perfect? And so really pulling that, myself out of that mentality, which allowed me to even do the podcast, because, my podcast is not perfect. I don't edit out every like or whatever you have, I just put it out there. Basically, I do like some editing, but not a ton. But taking that messy action and just doing it because, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I've always wanted to do. This is what's going to make me happy. Literally the whole premise behind the search for serotonin. I was like, if I don't start doing it now, I'm never going to start doing it. Yeah, and so, like, now I'm 6 months in, I'm on my, like, almost 25th episode, and I couldn't be happier, I
And you've
couldn't
got your
be
international
happier.
guests.
Yeah,
You've got
exactly.
international
Yeah.
guests.
Yeah, I've had you on, I've had people from Australia, people from all over the place, and I never would have had any of those conversations or talked to half of the people and that I did without this podcast. And so in 6 months looking back at it, I was in an office job in higher education. I was in grad school at the time, which I then dropped out to pursue the podcast completely. And if you would have told me 6 months ago that I would have had, 20 some conversations with people from all over the world that I really, really needed to have, I wouldn't have believed you. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think the word that you said earlier, which really stands out to me every single time, and it's a word I use to describe a lot of my own personal stuff, is managing.
Mhm.
With mental health, with all of this, you have to manage it every single day. Some people in the online space want to say, oh, I've cured my anxiety, I've cured my depression. And they may do things that really subside those anxiety and depression symptoms. But I truly think, that anxiety and depression, if you're diagnosed with it or any mental illness, you can manage it the best you can, but it's something that you are going to have to continually manage. I don't think it's something you can just snap your fingers and then you say, oh, I'm cured of it, it's gone. It's something that you have to, actively think about your whole life. But once you get committed to doing that and seeing, it is manageable, there is other ways of living, it can get better, it can get easier, then just once you realize that it's not as scary as people make it out to be, it's a lot more manageable. So,
And I think, yeah, you're right, because I also I kind of look at it in the same way in terms of trauma, and I know a lot of my professional clinical colleagues do the same. That we the experience doesn't go away. You
mhm,
know, the experience that you had doesn't go away. The trauma is the response that you have, the way it sits in your body and how it rewires your brain, your central nervous system, the stuff. Um, and but what we do in any kind of healing, any kind of recovery, and I include myself in this, is is you you go from a state of surviving to
mhm,
actually living and being able to transform through that process to because resilience is about transformation. It's transforming through that experience and being able then to live and manage the fact that you have been through that experience and the memories and the triggers that come from that and be able not to have it dictate who you are and how to live your life, but acknowledge that it's been a part of it but it doesn't have to lead you, it doesn't have to be the bit in control. And that's what recovery and healing is, and all the therapeutic work that we all do, that's what it is. It's about being able, you're never going to say I am completely 100% healed and recovered from that mental illness, from that trauma, because it's still you still had the experience. Unless you can make that magically disappear, it's still there. You just have to, the healing and the recovery and the journey around that is about not having it dictate that you're just surviving, but that you can live with confidence, with worth, with self-esteem, with less shame, with less guilt, with less self-blame, with all the toxicity that goes with that. And that's the same for mental illness, that and mental health, because we all have mental health and we all have
mhm.
impact on our mental health. Um, Now, I remember years back, kind of when I was a manager in child and adolescent mental health services, and we did a lot of destigmatizing work around mental health, because we all have it,
Yeah.
but we all have things that impact on the spectrum of our mental health and how we are then able to live and function in the world, and how we feel and how it sits in us, and how we're able to then, you know, function in our lives and enjoy our lives. And it's wonderful to hear where you are, and I realize it's not an end to your journey.
No.
But it is wonderful to hear where you are, and how compassion towards yourself, and also allowing yourself to receive it from other people has been an important part of that too.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, it's a lot of destigmatizing, something I say on my podcast all the time is you might have anxiety and your best friend might have anxiety, but your anxiety and their anxiety is gonna be totally different,
Yeah.
and everyone needs to realize that you have to do what's best for you. You can't, go online and see somebody who has anxiety and copy exactly what they do. Yeah, you can pull ideas, but that's not your life. That's not
Mm.
you. You don't know what's going to work for you until you give it a try. And, dealing with your mental health is not an easy journey. I've been there. I've been through dark times. I was in survival mode for a lot of my life. But like you said, once you work through it and you get to that point where you can actually live, it's so beautiful. I never thought it was possible, and I'm getting a little teary right now because it's just like it's
I
emotional.
am too. I am too for you.
Yeah, because like it is so beautiful getting to that point where you can just feel like you're safe, and you can just take a step back and say, okay, I don't have to, have my head down and be in survival mode all the time. I can actually just focus on me and what's going to make me happy. And I don't need to worry about everyone's outside opinion because it's just me and my internal self. And we're going to get through this together like we always have, kind of thing. So that's how I always look at it.
And I think that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And I was getting emotional for you as well. And if I could give you, I'm not. I always say I'm not a huggy person, but I think I am.
I'm the same way.
We're in the same room. I'd be giving you a big hug right now. Um, but just to kind of, I think this has been such a beautiful, inspirational conversation, Carolyn. Thank you. What would you say, in terms, and I think you've touched on it already, but just to kind of end the conversation with it, how do you make sure, how do you acknowledge that you still have to be compassionate toward yourself, even now when you are in that kind of much more peaceful and safe place? It's easy to kind of maybe let it go a little bit. So how do you make sure now that it's something that is at the forefront of your life?
Yeah, so I actually just started implementing some new things into my weekly and daily routine. So for my daily routine of the summer, I've decided that when I wake up in the morning, instead of grabbing my phone or worrying about, my to-do list for the day, I just put on my sneakers, go outside and take like a mile and a half walk. And during that time, I listen to music, I listen to my podcast. I use that time to just really just focus on me for the day, start off right, connect with my thoughts, because I'm an anxious person. So if I get out on a walk first thing in the morning, I can let all my thoughts run and then, a lot of
Yeah.
ideas that come through or whatever. But during that time, just telling myself, you don't even, if you, as long as you make it outside the door, you don't even have to walk far or anything like that. And just saying, do what you can today. And
Yeah.
then by giving that mentality and that compassion of just do what you can, no pressure to start out the day, just, do what feels good. And for the past 3 or 4 days in a row, I've been doing that mile and a half walk with no problem. And it's over in the blink of an eye because I'm I don't put pressure on that time. I'm just using that space and time as, okay, whatever you need to do with this 30 minutes to an hour, take what you need and just focus on you. And then also something that I've been doing is once a week now, my schedule allows it that I can take just one full day off. And I don't put pressure on those days either, because with the perfectionism aspect, I don't put any,
Yeah.
I'm a list person every day. I have a list to follow, check things off the list, get stuff done. But one day a week, I'm like, no lists, no rules. If you go to the grocery store and you do laundry and you do a bunch of tasks today, perfect. We weren't expecting you to do anything, but if you don't even get out of bed or you don't get off the couch and all you do is binge watch Netflix today, then that's what you need to do. And so
Yeah.
I just reserve that one day a week because my schedule allows it. And I just say, this is your day, whatever you need. We want to take a bubble bath. We take a bubble bath. You want to go to grab lunch with ourselves. We're going to go grab lunch with ourselves. So just allowing myself to have that space every day and then once a week to just, not push myself, just focus on, hey, what does my body need right now? What do I want to do genuinely? And so I think that really helps keep me in check with the self compassion and also, the self care and self love, all those other pieces. And, really making that time for myself because I could easily just say, I'm not doing that. But carving out the time to do it is the biggest thing and allowing myself to take that guilt-free time off and not feel like I have to be productive has really helped my relationship with myself.
Oh, I'm so, I'm just like, I love you. I'm just like listening to you and I'm like, oh my God, come and work with me. Come and work come sit here and work with me.
We always have such great conversations. And every time I see your stuff on social media or we have a conversation, it's always puts a smile on my face and it's a great time. So anytime you want to collaborate in the future, I'm always here for it. I love our conversation so much.
I think it's just, it has been such a wonderful conversation. And I think, just to kind of, pick up on a couple of things that you said, which I think are really important to just repeat is that, what you say to yourself, and for those people watching, and it's important to say, that you do what you can today, that's if you can put that on your fridge, if you can put that on your ceiling when you wake up,
Yes.
do what you can today. That's the simplest but the most effective thing that you can possibly say to yourself. And the second thing that you said, which I think is really important for people to remember, is, what does my body need? What does my body need right now? What does my body need today? I need, and actively listening to yourself, listening to your body and your mind. And I think those two things, those two statements that you made, are hugely important for people to remember. And I do make, I don't make clients, I invite clients to kind of to write anywhere, some of the things that are really important for them. So one of my clients, Sarah, she actually wrote, because a lot of my clients kind of they say I'm kind of sitting there on their shoulder when they're not in a session with me.
Yeah.
So, and they go to do something, or they go to say something, or they go to say perhaps something, not very nice about themselves, and it's like, what would Helen say?
Yeah.
So one of my clients actually put that on her cupboard in her kitchen. And I think there's just some things that that you have said that are hugely effective but sound simple, but they're massively effective. And what can I do today? How can I do what I can today? And what does my body need?
Mm-hmm.
Hugely important, hugely. And Carolyn, I think your words today, your conversation today, your sharing of your vulnerability and your strength and what you've been through, I can't thank you enough for coming in and doing this with me. It's been an extraordinary conversation, and I know anybody watching this back on replay, or like I said, it's bank holiday here in the UK. And it's mildly sunny, so people will be outside. But I know it's an inspiration, and I will share it to Instagram as well, because I know that's where you hang out more.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my just where can people find you? Just I'll also pop links in the comments, but just where can people find you to follow you, to hear your podcast, and hear the inspiration from you even more than you've shared here now?
Yeah. So the Search for Serotonin is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as Anchor. And then I am on Instagram with the podcast at The Search for Serotonin is the official page for that. And then there's also my personal Instagram, which is at Carolyn_Ferrick. It's linked in the bio of the Search for Serotonin podcast page. So if anybody wants to follow my personal page, but a lot of the podcast stuff is on the Search for Serotonin page. So you can give me a follow there. And that's mainly where I post right now. That's a lot of where my information is going. So
brilliant. So I will make sure that this link goes into Instagram, and we get it in there too. Carolyn, thank you once again for being here with me. And I do love our conversations, and I think we just need to regularly have a catch up. I think it's
yes, I agree.
Make it live, make it live as well. But no, I want to thank you again. And I know we had a couple of timings changes, but coming here today and also for doing this, even though you felt anxious, I can't thank you enough for doing that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for allowing me to have this space to share my story and open up. And just one more thing for the listeners out there, I always end my podcast with "This world is better with you in it." So if you take anything from this conversation, just remember that this world is always better with you in it. And there is always another day to get better. So,
brilliant. Yeah. I'm not going to say anything else. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. And Conversations with Compassion will be back in, I want to say next week. I think there's a session next week. So I'll see everybody then. But Carolyn, thank you once again. And thank you everyone for being here and watching. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.